side-scrolling space shooter action with Uridium. Uridium is a 1986 game from Hewson. I don't think it needs much introduction because C64 owners will already know this is pretty much a solid classic for their system. Programmed by Andrew Braybrook. And you launch out of your mothership there, and you have to fly left and right, or right initially, over the dreadnaught, shooting as much as you can, avoiding the mines like that. And no, I don't have invulnerability on, it just didn't touch me in the right place. Destroy as much as you can, and then you'll be told to land. And then you have a little bonus sequence, at least on the 64. Avoid bits on the ship that were chewed and the enemy bullets, because I've been shot there. So we launch again. There's no power-ups as such, just bullets that you can see firing there. And when you die, everything resets, so you have to go back again and kill as much as possible. At some stage, once you've shot enough and it's the computer decides that, you'll be told you can land. And that is usually on a runway strip at the far right of the dreadnaught. Just avoiding those things in the centre there that look like background graphics, but in fact, they are objects that if you run into them, you will crash. So that's the runway I've just gone over there. Right, now it's saying land. When the land now sign comes up, the normal waves of enemies will stop coming at you, but the ultra enemies will come at you at waves of one, so you need to avoid that. Spectrum version running on my 48K Plus, so it's the same deal. Nice and fast here on the Spectrum, looking as you'd expect it to look. It's not perhaps very colourful, which means things can blend into each other, but it's just as hard. Over to the Amstrad CPC and just looking at it on a Philips CRT monitor. So essentially the same as the Spectrum version, but with a splash of colour and slower. How many times do I say that? But the enemies at least do stand out from the background, as do the mines. Which one of them's coming after me there? Avoid that. I've crashed into the scenery. Yeah, it can be hard to see what's actually scenery and what isn't. This is what it looks like on an Amstrad GT65 green screen monitor. Nice and clear, works very well on the green screen. Oh, I've done the same thing again and died. There you go, on the CPC, I've just been told I can land, so let's find the runway on the far right, and down I go. And that's all it says at the end of the level. Dreadnaught's defence is penetrated, and you go on to level 2. At least on the Amstrad and Spectrum versions. C64 owners will be feeling something's wrong here, and you'll shortly see. BBC Micro version, and guess what? You can redefine the keys to something sensible. Oh joy. This is what you want on a BBC game, to be able to redefine the keys. And off we go. My goodness, look at it go. Look at it go. Full 50 frames a second animation like the C64. Programmed by Angus Hughes on the BBC. And I believe he didn't do any other games apart from this, if I'm right. Yes, the dreadnaught layout is slightly cut down. We land. Now, Uridium, that should be showing me bonuses or quit, but it doesn't, because it plays up on BBC Masters even if you have a switchable ROM like I have. Uridium on the BBC is written very close to the metal of the machine itself. So actually, it can actually play up in some emulators as well. Atari ST version. Very early ST game. No Amiga version, you have to wait for Uridium 2 for that. And the things that strike you about the ST version is it's like playing it in treacle. In fact, it's the graphics are very un-16-bit. It's like they've been converted from the 64 and just plonked onto the ST. And now the ST's having trouble moving the game around, or they've deliberately slowed it down. It's very slow. That's about as fast as you can go. And everything responds so slowly, especially if you're changing direction, because on all versions your craft has inertia. Alright, so we've landed. And this is what you should have seen on the BBC. You have to press fire at the right point to get the bonus. And I get to the top. Oh, we're like, no. But we do have the Destruct Sequence Prime, Formation Annihilation bonus, Ship Destruct bonus, and then... No, again, C64 owners will be shouting out, there's something wrong on all these other versions. Here's what's supposed to happen. This is the 64 version. You take off from the ship, and then it disintegrates behind you. That's what's supposed to happen. No version other than the 64 does this. And you can see those ST graphics are, yeah, directly ported from the C64. And this is the speed it's supposed to be at. It's quite a hard game because those objects that you can hit are hard to see, and you can go so fast you're on them before you know about it. But this is level 2, I think it's lead. And the levels go through different themes of different metals. BBC Micro version. Looking very pink, but just as fast and smooth as the C64. No doubt C64 owners will be going, well, it's not as good as our version. Trust me, for BBC, this is absolutely superb. On a machine starved of quality arcade games, this is stunning. Back to the Spectrum running on my +2 now, so it's an RGB. You can tip the craft on its side, like I just did there and there, which can be used to get the craft through narrow gaps later in the game. Looking at the magazine, Zap gave the game for the 64 74% crash on the Spectrum, 90%, Your Sinclair, 9 out of 10, and Amstrad Action for the re-release in October 88, 2 years after the original release, gave it 68%. And on we go to level 3, which is, is it copper? I think it's, yeah, it's copper. The yellows there. Oh, watch the mine. No, the mines. You've got to watch out for those. Amstrad version. Again, just though baddies stand out from the background, which is nice, but it is slower. The mines chase after you. So you mustn't hang around the areas they spawn from for too long. Sound on all the conversions is pretty standard, but the C64 version has a lovely tune and just the right level of arcade style beeps and shooting noises and sounds to indicate that stuff is going on. There's a drop zone influence here, really. It just feels like a top-down drop zone game with the same kind of cues and zaps. Uridium is a trendsetter in many ways. In other ways, you can see where it draws its inspiration from. Atari ST version? Well, they think it's the 64 from looking at the graphics. Yeah, it's clearly the 64 graphics. But why it isn't faster? I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? It feels very primitive for an ST game. There's a touch of shoot-'em-up construction kit about it, especially with the lack of pace. It still plays fine, it's just a weird one. I think it's such an early ST game. But you're not that pleased. Imagine if you'd upgraded from the 64 and you buy Uridium again and find it's the same game, but slower. There is Uridium Plus as well, which came out later as part of a compilation, I think, which has extra levels. And Amiga owners, well, you've got Uridium 2 in the 1990s. There is a DOS version as well. I don't really have the wherewithal to start battling with the laptop today because it's going to need a slow computer, and the Amstrad CPC 2086 is currently out of service because the power supply has gone pop. So rather than me trying to get this working on my DX4 100, which will be just very difficult and the speed will be all wrong, let's just pretend, for the sake of this video, it doesn't exist. And while we're pretending things don't exist, there is a version for something called the Nintendo Entertainment System. Not heard of that one before. It sounds like some obscure Japanese system that sold about 2 units, to be honest. It's hard to imagine why they couldn't do this on the ST. You'd think it'd have memory. It just feels a bit... yeah, like we've just shoved this game onto the ST and let's just flog it to ST owners. Level 4, silver. I think there's 16 levels in total, ending on Uridium, but we'll find that out in a bit. Each level gets subtly harder. But the layouts of the ships remain basically the same. There's just tighter gaps to pass through and more obstacles. There is one difference, however, with the ST version. On the other versions, like the 64 here, you are told to land after you've destroyed a certain amount of things. On the ST, you appear to be able to land at any time. Over to the BBC Micro, and we're on to level 4, and I'm running this under emulation now, thanks to Warren Pilkington, who got me a hack working for Infinite Lives, but I couldn't get it running on my real BBC because I'd have to take the card out of the machine. It's all neatly internally installed, so unusually on ChinnyVision we're using BBEM here under emulation just to show you the more levels. So that's level 4, here we are. And now we can land, and hopefully we'll get the proper yeah, here we go. At least under emulation we do get this bit working properly. I think it sounded slightly out of sequence as well, but hey, that's emulation for you. On to level 5, iron. It's slightly shrunk... oh, I've died. It's slightly shrunk down on the BBC. The levels appear to be slightly smaller. But it's really fast and nice. Died again. It's just very impressive. It's a shame there's not more BBC arcade games of this quality. ST version. Which could really do with some of that speed of the BBC version. This is level 8, tungsten. It is easier to instigate... oh, I've died. You just don't... by the time you've seen it, you don't get time to turn around. Even though the ST version is really slow, you're frantically pulling in the other direction on the joystick, but your craft just carries on because of the inertia. And they haven't compensated for that, even though the game's much slower. So you carry on for ages, even though you've changed direction. So the best bet is to generally go as slow as possible. But the plus side on the ST is much easier to fly on your side, although I still didn't make that. The game is very generous with extra lives, I will say that. So although it's hard, actually, you get plenty of extra lives. I do like the Amstrad version when it uses green, yellow and red. Spectrum version. You try alloy level. Getting pretty tight now with some of these gaps, although at least the inertia works better on the Spectrum than it does on the ST. Spectrum version came out after the C64. Obviously the C64 version is the original. Do I need to tell you that? And this is the final level. It's level 15. I said there was 16. This is level 15 and we are landing. You'd have to be doing very well to get here. I've been cheating for some time on all of these versions now. Collision detection off, that sort of thing. So if you've seen things hit me, that's why. There's the end of game message. Good zapping turkey. And that's why this level is so short, because half the level is the congratulations message. And then it loops around again to level 1. Uridium, by any measure, is a solid gold classic on the 64, but you don't need me to tell you that. What's of interest here is the other versions. Frankly, none of them measure up to that 64 version, but I think it would be impossible for them to do that. If any of them could get close, it should be the ST, but what we have is the C64 version with bits cut out and running in treacle, inexcusable on a 16-bit machine, especially the direct porting of the graphics. The Spectrum version's fun, but the key thing is you would still have been slightly embarrassed to show this to your 64 owning mate. But I believe it was still voted one of the best shoot-em-ups of the year when it was released, and amongst its competition I can't really disagree with that. Amstrad version, just a little bit too slow. I do like the splashes of colour, but beyond that, as a budget purchase though, I think perhaps Amstrad Action were a little bit harsh with 68%. BBC version is stunning for the machine, on a machine starved of good quality arcade games and good quality conversions. This game stands out. Angus Hughes did a superb job here. Yes, it's cut down, but it's 50 frames a second really fast and has that frantic arcade feel, and good work for allowing people to redefine the keys. If I'm going to pick fault with Uridium overall, it is a memory test, because you have to be able to remember where the obstacles are, because the game can be so fast, especially on the 64, you'll be slamming into them before you've even seen things come onto the screen. And secondly, there's a lack of power-ups. It's a top-down drop zone in many ways, so you could argue, well, there's not a lot of new stuff here, but in many ways it is a unique game and it's a trendsetter, especially for the 64. Certainly for C64 owners and BBC owners, this is a game you must have in your collection.